trade out at number 2 pick and try to get extra picks in the first round, because you could get fill maybe several positions there in that draft, and that's what they need as much as anything.
And Jim, it's a question I get asked a lot down here in Atlanta. How are the Titans marketed? And I tell people all the time, Jim, after Chris Johnson left, and I don't know who you market for the Titans anymore. And you've been in Nashville all the time, covering the team every day. Who can the Titans market on their roster? Because to me, there's nobody on the roster that I would market anybody. It's like the Titans are the most nameless team in the league, if you ask me. Is that an assessment you would agree with? Because that's what I tell my listeners here in Atlanta, because I can't market them. I don't know nobody on the roster I would say I want to market these guys to say, come to Tennessee, watch the Titans play. Because once you got rid of Chris Johnson and all his problems, who can you market there in Tennessee?
Yeah, they don't really have, a face for franchise player, anymore. But once Chris Johnson left, and back in the day, they had a lot of them, from Steve McNair to Eddie George to Frank Wycheck to Javon Curse, even Jeff Fisher, certainly the guys people knew across the country. Now they're kind of a faceless franchise. They don't have. They would like for somebody to stand up and take that role. And they've got some good players. Jarrell Casey's a Pro Bowl type player. Delaney Walker had a Pro Bowl type year, but they don't have enough marquee players. They certainly don't have a face the franchise type player like they used to, and that's one of the things they got to find. I mean, Zach Mettenberger potentially could be that guy if he develops like they hope he will, and if they draft well and if they can find more impact players, those players will get attention nationally. But right now, there's just not a lot of guys who move the needle, and get the people in the seats, and that's something they're going to be facing. I mean, this team sold out every game since they've been here for 16 years, but that doesn't mean that they've had people in those seats every game. I mean, the attendance is dropping off. People are not going to the games. They've got a home schedule next year that doesn't include a lot of marquee teams. So they're going to be hard pressed to keep the excitement going after a 2-14 season, and they need to find more guys like that to at least give people a reason to go to the games on Sunday.
Better believe that, Jim. And Jim, I'll tell you what, I told listeners I would get you on the show. I'm glad we made it happen today, and Jim, and I hope to do it again with you real soon around draft time. We can see what the Titans have came through for agency in the draft, and we can assess them a little bit better.
That sounds good. I appreciate you having me on. I hope you have a happy New Year.
You too now, Jim.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too now. And that was Jim Wyatt of Tennessean. Follow his work at J Wyatt Sports on Twitter and at Tennessean.com. And coming up next, Andrew Maraniss.
For all your photo, video, and voiceover needs, check out the fine folks at Blueberry Productions. They will take good care of you. If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself. Check out their work at blueberryproductions.tv, a Facebook page, Blueberry Productions, also a Vimeo page, a YouTube page, and it's Blueberry, BLUBERRY, Prod on Twitter. Check them out today. Blueberry Productions, great people, great work, great service. Hip-hop fans, I got a great album for you. The debut album from Family Grind ENT, True Speech and 313 Fresh. We're going to give you 2 discs, 33 songs of pure, genuine hip-hop. Album is available on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, illstreetrex.com, and streaming live right now on Rhapsody, Beats Music, Spotify, Xbox Music, Slacker Radio, and SoundCloud. Check them out today. True Speech and 313 Fresh, Family Grind, ENT. Believe in it, get it.
Welcome back to the JR The Bossman Show with John Beckler. We were just joined by Jim Wyatt of Tennessee, talking Tennessee Titans. But now we'll be joined by an author. I met him at OVC Media Days with basketball. He has a book called Strong Side, a book about Perry Wallace, the first African-American player to integrate in the SEC at Vanderbilt, and books available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookman, Bookwoman, and Maraniss. And so we're joined right here by Andrew Maraniss. Andrew, how are you doing today, buddy? Glad to have you on the show finally. How's life been treating you, man?
Oh, it's been great. It's great to be on your show. It was fun to meet you at OVC Media Day, as you mentioned. The last month has been a real whirlwind for me. Very exciting time with the book coming out December 1st after having worked on it for 8 years and finally getting a chance for people to read it and to get out there and talk about it.
And let's start right there, Andrew. Talk about the whirlwind it's been for you. And talk about that a little bit. How did it come to you to write about Perry Wallace, write about this topic? What sparked in your heart to say, I want to cover this topic, cover Perry Wallace? And how has this whirlwind been the past months for you, traveling across the nation, promoting the book, and this is showing off your work and showing off the fruits of your labor?
Sure. So the story itself for me goes back 25 years. It's when I was 19 years old, sophomore at Vanderbilt here in Nashville. I read an article about Perry Wallace, and it talked about his first game in Starkville at Mississippi State, his freshman year, and just how brutal the racism was that he encountered on that road trip. And at the time I was at Vanderbilt on a sports writing scholarship. I was a history major, and so, I saw two things coming together, sports and history, that I was really interested in. And so I wrote a term paper about Perry Wallace for a Black history class that I was taking at the time. The next year I was sports editor of the school newspaper and wrote some columns about Perry. And so I got to know him, way back then, when I was 19 and 20 years old. And his story stuck with me over the years. And it was 8 years ago that I decided I wanted to write this book. So it was 3 or 4 years just of research, then another 3 or 4 years of writing. And as far as this whirlwind goes, I guess the most interesting thing about it has been the reaction to Perry Wallace himself. I've been with him in Washington, D.C., and here in Nashville for events for the book. And it's been incredibly gratifying for me to see the way that people are reacting to the story and the way they just want to meet Perry, to shake his hand, to say thank you for what he did. Some people apologizing for not having done more to help him when he was the first black basketball player in the SEC, or, really just as a student at Vanderbilt. They didn't realize how lonely he was and how difficult things were for him at the time. And to see that 45 years later, people really affecting them in an emotional way has been very interesting for me to see.
Well, and Andrew, if you could talk a little bit about, the journey of writing the book, and it took you, as you mentioned, 8 years to get kind of from start to finish, and you're here now at the finish line, and the book's out in the public's hands. What was that like, doing all that research and all that work for 8 years to devote that much time of your life to this project?
Yeah.
Explain a little bit of how that is. How does that feel to have it, finally be complete?
Well, one thing I should say is it took 8 years because I was doing it on the side. So I have a regular job here in Nashville. I ended up getting married and having 2 kids in the middle of all this also. So it was something that I was working on whenever I had a free minute, either after work or on weekends while the kids were napping, that sort of thing. But I loved doing the research for this book. I interviewed more than 80 people for it, and I found that to be really fun and interesting to find new people and hear new stories, that I knew would make good anecdotes in the book. I loved going to the various libraries and archives and finding old newspaper articles or memos that no one had ever seen before from a chancellor at Vanderbilt, or a professor, that sort of thing. And then the writing was interesting. It was fun. I've never written anything longer than like a magazine article before. And this book is 470 pages, so in some ways it felt a little daunting to have that in front of me, but I just approached it chapter by chapter, and that made it seem manageable to me. And there came a certain point in the process where I realized I'm really going to do this, and that was an exciting point to reach. And now, like I've said, for people to read it and for the reaction has been incredible. It's been the #1 book in Nashville for a month now in the local rankings. On Amazon, it was the #1 civil rights book for a period, up to #2 on the basketball books. So I'm really pleased with the reception for the book.
And Andrew, what are some things that you found during your research that opened up your eyes and stood out to you as this wow moments when you was actually, this is really happened to Perry Wallace? So what are some things that you can share with us to open your eyes and was like wow to you as you went through your process of researching this to write this book about Perry Wallace?
Well, Perry Wallace is an incredible person. He wasn't just a great basketball player. He was an amazing student. He was valedictorian of his class in high school. He was a double engineering major at Vanderbilt. It was very interesting to me that there's so much more to his story than just basketball. He grew up in Nashville during the height of the civil rights movement. When he was 12 years old, he would sneak downtown to watch the sit-ins that were taking place at the lunch counters in Nashville. When he was in college, he met Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael and Fannie Lou Hamer and Robert F. Kennedy and so many important figures in the civil rights movement. So all of that was eye-opening to me, and I think adds another dimension to the book. I think people would probably anticipate that he would have difficult moments on road trips, and that is certainly true. And I've got stories in the book about his first game at Mississippi State, game at Ole Miss where he's hit in the face and the crowd is cheering that he's been bloodied. But then the moments that were a little bit more subtle, but just as difficult for him to deal with, were a certain loneliness he felt. And it was hard for people at the time to understand. Whenever they saw him, he was surrounded by thousands of people on the basketball court, but then he would go back to his dorm room, and existing on campus was very difficult. The Vanderbilt's Greek system was still segregated. At the time, there were very few African-American students on campus, period. In some ways, it was a hostile environment to have to just exist on as a regular person and student off the basketball court. So he had pressures to perform as a basketball player, and then he had a whole separate set of issues to deal with off the court, and tried to get into all of that in the book.
Well, and Andrew, I believe earlier you mentioned that you had interviewed approximately 80 people during your research, and I'd be interested to know if you ran into any scenarios during those interviews where people may have kind of pushed away a little bit, if they were involved in the situation, or if there was ever any drudging up of old feelings that made folks cringe a little bit, because it is a difficult topic to deal with. I'm sure that there's tons of regret out there for the way that the man was treated at that time, and as life goes on, people evolve and realize some of their mistakes in the past. I wonder if you got into any of that during those interviews.
Yeah, it was not easy for some people during the course of these interviews.